This week on New to You, we talk about Halloween 3 and the most dangerous game.
Hey everybody, welcome to a continuation of our theme, Scare.
Swallow your soul.
I'll swallow your soul. This is the New to You show. We're continuing our scary theme. With me this week, I'm one of your hosts, John Holt. With me this week is...
Wait. Everyone's got to say it in a spooky voice.
Spooky. All right, I'll come back around to me.
Say it.
I'm John the Fog.
John the Fog, I love it.
I'll describe what the fog is later.
I think we know.
Go.
Okay.
I'm Keith Vincent.
I'm Giaco, the Taco Furino, the haunted taco.
I'm Nightmare.
All right.
Nightmare, keeping you up at night.
That's right.
By doing your taxes with the light on.
Yeah, that's what I do.
Woo, taxes. Scary.
Scares me.
Have you filed your quarterlies?
I certainly don't sleep through the first 2 weeks of April.
So the fog comes from when I was younger. I would stay at a friend's house, and usually we'd play video games till the wee hours of the morning. And if the sun had come up, usually his folks had woken up and they would come downstairs and see me at the computer with my buddy passed out asleep, and then usually by the time they had come, got done whatever they did in the morning like normal humans, I would have headed home. And so they're the fog. You kind of see him a little bit at the board and then he's gone. As soon as the sun is up all the way. So that's where I got the fog from. I think
I've heard that story.
And that they didn't tell me that. They just had been calling me the fog for a while, and then it just sort of eventually happened. So
that's a good one.
That's a nickname. Yeah.
Wait, how come then when we were in art school and you were assigning everyone nicknames?
I didn't know my nickname
you
was
didn't
the
know
fog.
it even
They've
then?
been calling me the fog, kind of the family.
When did you learn this?
I think it must have been 5 or 6 years ago.
Was that Brad's?
This
folks?
is Todd's folks, yeah. But yeah, so that was my nickname. But we were handing out nicknames and none of mine stuck,
No.
But you had a few, Keith. Beef Hammer was one.
Come on, you can't be telling people.
but Beef Hammer...
Now they're going to know that's my password to my bank accounts. Thanks, I got to change it.
No, but Beef Hammer is basically, we're at your apartment. You're first one in Boston. And they had a hammer and nail on the wall. And they're well, we got this frozen ground chuck. It's hard. Let's just use that. And so...
Did it work?
Hammer.
Probably not. A lot of our ideas didn't work. But, I worked in the meat department at Kroger's in Tennessee, and so Platt was already calling me Beef.
Oh,
so
nice.
when that happened...
It was already straight Beef Hammer.
Yep.
All right. So, that tangent was nice.
So what's new to everyone this week? Let's start with you, Giaco. What's new to you?
This week, I just recently finished reading, for the first time ever, Stephen King's The Stand. Which is
cool.
really a sort of monumentally long epic. I had 2 different versions. One, it was 1,100 pages. The other was 1,300 based on the typeface, I guess.
Huh.
But it was the complete and uncut edition, and I really liked it.
It's
really
good? Still holds up?
Still holds up, yeah.
What is that? M-O-O-N. That spells?
Yeah.
What does it spell?
Everything. The one
okay,
character
that's right,
would say, M-O-O-N, that spells my main man. That's great.
And so the guy who played him in the made-for-TV movie of that ended up being the starfish in... he's the voice of the starfish in SpongeBob SquarePants.
Oh, isn't he also on Coach?
Yep, same guy.
The big tall blonde guy on Coach, yeah.
So had you seen the miniseries before reading it?
No, I cannot wait to watch it, but I hadn't seen it before.
I had never read the book, but the the movie didn't do anything for me.
Yeah.
So
I'm a little
maybe just
afraid.
be glad in the book. Just
Yeah. I definitely have these characters sort of cemented in my head as looking a certain way, sounding
Sure.
a certain way. And I know like Rob Lowe played somebody in it, and Gary Sinise, and so
Yeah, I remember when it came on, and I was in high school, and everybody was watching it, and I watched like the first 2 maybe, and I was into it, but I didn't have DVR back then,
yeah.
so I
So
just
if you miss
never
the day,
watched the
it's
rest
done.
of it. Yeah.
Yep.
So I know people who like VHS recordings, and you would
Yeah.
pass that around or whatever.
Um,
Did you? So it starts off with like a plague, right? That
Right.
sort of wipes everybody out, and that's a pretty. I mean, that's one of those sort of maybe not modern, but it's like a real world scare.
it is, yeah, because it's a bioengineered plague. The U.S. government creates it. A millisecond error, computer error, lets it out, and then 99% of the Earth's population dies because of it.
Wow. Or
And
gets raptured. You know, who knows?
Right, or gets raptured. No, there are lots of dead bodies. It's very clearly that they just drop. And the cool thing about it is that even though it's so long, it feels like multiple different books. Like this could have been a trilogy that they smushed together into one long book, and it moves really nicely. I thought it was a really smooth read, really good.
Cool.
All right.
Was it scary at all ever?
Definitely, it was actually there were moments that really scared me, and I don't normally get too scared from reading. But there
That's
were
funny. Last
moments-
week I was just mentioning that. I'll let you finish your
No.
thought. I apologize. Last week I was just saying like I don't ever really get scared from reading books, but somebody was telling me that reading The Shining is terrifying. So considering that's another
Yeah.
Stephen
is-
King book, that's good to know that he can do that.
King is great at it. I think the key to that is that he spends a lot of time. Most of the time of the book is spent making you love these characters, and then you see them like sort of get killed or get have bad fortune fall on them or be in stressful situations, and that stress feels so much more real, even than a movie could do. In The Shining. You feel bad for Danny, but in reading The Shining, you're like, oh my God, Danny, it's gonna be okay. I'm so sorry. It's like it's a very.
So you
different
read The
experience.
Shining too?
Yeah.
Was it as terrifying as my ex-girlfriend made it out to be?
Yeah, it's very
Wow,
very
good.
scary. Yeah.
So I mean, I do find reading to be more terrifying.
Well, I mean,
usually.
I'm sure it can be. I just have never
Yeah,
read anything.
I guess when I'm reading stuff, like I usually gravitate towards like pulp or whatever, and so your pulp master is Lovecraft,
Right.
or whatever, and his stuff, it's a little more like weird, it's like Eldritch-y sort of weird horror, but he's definitely the master of like building, like describing the borders, describing the sort of the outline of the monster, but not the monster itself.
right.
And,
Letting your imagination have
right,
to fill in
and
those.
it's really more about how it's affecting the world around it is what's important, and that it's just going. There's no, the hopelessness of it is also like that. I think is a pretty common monster theme that I enjoy.
the eventuality.
Right. So, like zombies is a pretty big like pop culture trope thing right now, but that's sort of it's like a walking plague. It's a literal manifestation of a plague, and plagues are sort of an airborne thing that could kill you without you knowing how or why is scary. But then having it be something that's violent and then could have been someone you loved moments before is also scary. And plagues can be carried by someone you love and effectively kill you, but this is a lot more violent. That's why, like, for zombie stuff, that trope I always found that sort of like the oppressive quiet moments are scarier than your gore moments. Your gore moments, you need them, but it's more about watching the world that these characters are in just crush them. And that really just like you empathize with the characters and you feel that constriction, and stress is a good word for it that they're put under and their ordeals. But King's like, even Christine, which is the monster car, devil car,
Right.
has this sort of, no matter what these kids do, they can't get rid of this thing.
Right.
Like there's a certain point where Christine is just a rim. rolling through the thing, and it starts to build the car around the rim again.
Wow.
And it's like, holy, like, what? How are we going to get rid of this thing? So
Yeah.
that's pretty terrifying that this thing you think you should be able to deal with there's no real escape. But yeah.
What was new for you this week?
It was not spooky. I got a new camera, a Sony Nex
Ooh,
6.
a haunted camera?
Well, it is good at for low light, so that could be spooky, I guess. And I did take some pictures earlier of our setup here. I don't know if we said, but we're recording this show and the previous show with the lights off, but with some little battery-operated candles that John can change the colors on, so it's very spooky. And with my new Sony Nex 6, I can capture those pictures. It's a cool it's a DSLR, but it's mirrorless. So it's this new wave of...
Which I love those.
Do you have one?
No, my friend Alexi has been using it, and it
cool.
takes the most beautiful video because it has a bunch of manual controls, so he can do this wonderful depth of field stuff. It's just, and he knows how to use it. It's really good
and
stuff.
it's kind of like I think some DSLR people are maybe a little bit snobby about them, but I think it's great because it makes the manual controls very easy, much easier than on my... I mean, I just had like a super consumery Nikon D40. I mean, I still have it.
Well, that's still a major camera. That's no slack.
Yeah. But it's not, like one of the pro ones. But I find this new one to be... it's easier to find all the, the ISO and the manual focus and the aperture and the shutter. It's all just very... they have all these knobs and everything. You don't have to go into the menu smartly. All the time.
Yeah, good. But, well, I mean, also, it being mirrorless... one of the problems I find with DSLRs is that you still have to look through the viewfinder to take your picture before you can see it on the screen. And with your mirrorless ones, it can go straight to the screen. So I personally think that that's way better than having to look through the... I mean, I like being able to look through the viewfinder. That's great, but I shouldn't feel like I need to. Seeing the screen and knowing that that's your shot, I think that's a way more comfortable.
Yeah, and this has
a
live view of, you can adjust the shutter speed and it'll show you in the live view. It's getting darker now.
It's going to be,
but it also this camera does have an electronic viewfinder. So, and it is activated by a sensor, so it knows when you put your eye up to it.
Neat.
Which is really, even if you don't like to use it, sometimes you got to use it if it's really sunny outside.
Yeah,
because you just can't see the LCD screen. So as soon as you put your eye up to it, it activates that. And
this particular Sony, you can buy a little hood to protect it from the sun.
Cool.
In fact, I think my friend Alexi has that.
Oh, awesome.
Cool. Yep.
So yeah.
All right. Cool camera.
Yeah. What was new to you this week, Keith?
I was going to mention that me and John Holt just last weekend went to go see Monty Python's Search for the Holy Grail in a midnight movie in New York here, and they gave away free coconuts to make the horse sounds. So that was new to me, and they gave us free coconuts, and which was a great little giveaway. But it was a little annoying in the theater when every time the guys were running, people were going, "Oh, we're a part of it." That was a little.
But come on, you were doing it too.
I wasn't.
Oh, you weren't?
Nope.
John, were you?
Not too much.
I don't think Holt did it either.
I got pretty, we're getting on in years. So going to a midnight movie, it's a lot of fun, and usually, you've had a full day, and you're going to a movie. I love Monty Python's The Holy Grail. And it was just fun to see it in a theater and laugh along with everybody, and it was really enjoyable. But I was not in a interactive mode.
Yeah, well, luckily, I'm sure it's way worse in a lot of other theaters. This, they gave us the coconuts, so that was a little annoying. But at least people weren't kind of shouting back, lines, and everyone knows these movies by heart. So, every person in the same row could just go like, it's a duck. What else floats? A duck.
Right.
But luckily, there wasn't an awful lot of that. There was just the coconut.
All right.
John, what was new to you?
So it was new to me. I've had minutes to think about this.
Literally
minutes.
minutes.
So at work, I've mentioned before that we got a 3D printer. So I ordered some glow-in-the-dark filament lights for it. And so I've been printing a deck box for Magic the Gathering.
Did it work?
Yeah, so far so good. But it's this weird model that I found I didn't make this myself. I found one that's hinged, and as you open the hinges, the box, like your deck raises up from inside it. And so I made, I took the mana symbols, like a skull and a sun, and kind of had them like these two face plates. One is like black on white, and one is white on black. In the white, I used the glow in the dark filament for.
Dude, do me a favor, take pictures of it, put it on the.
All right, I will. I have to do some sanding to get it all to fit together, but it's should be good to go pretty soon.
And I'll take pictures of it with my...
Yeah.
With your camera.
And use another camera to take pictures of your camera so you can see that too.
Yeah. Cool. And someone take a picture of me reading.
All right, yeah.
Or we could just get a picture of you standing.
Yeah.
On the stand.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's roll in. So last week we talked about a book and a movie, or a short story and a movie. And this week our other pick is another short story and a movie. We haven't talked about albums in a few episodes at all. And I just wanted to kind of, sometimes we talk about this as, besides these two mediums like visual storytelling, I guess, besides like reading it in books and reading it or watching it on TV or in movies, what are other sort of avenues for terror or horror that you guys can think of?
Video games.
All right.
Yeah, there's definitely
Video games are really spooky. BioShock Infinite came out this year, and that's a really
There's
spooky,
some spooky
one.
ones?
Yeah, that one I talked about earlier, Gone Home Game. It's got a little spooky vibe.
I remember back in the day, well, it wasn't that far back in the day, but Silent Hill, when that first came out, oh my gosh, that movie, that game gave me nightmares. And Metroid, the original Metroid. It seems silly now that we have all these, but I just remember the Metroid game being so scary.
Yeah.
And the music, boom, 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 boom. It's just such a scary movie, a scary game. Yeah.
What about you, Giaco?
So for another sort of genre,
or
another
what do you
medium, I've been listening to a lot of like sort of horror storytelling podcasts,
like Night Vale.
Night Vale and stuff like that. It's so cool to hear this sort of.
I
like
haven't heard of any of those.
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah, that's Welcome to Night Vale. But then there's a few others too, like what's the one, Tales from Beyond the Pale?
Oh,
is
yeah.
like a thing as
So, well, Night Vale is specifically like almost an ongoing story, right? Where it's sort of like you're hearing radio transmissions from this town.
Yeah.
And
it's like the
weird
local,
things are happening.
The weekly, like, sort of news update, but it's all very Lovecraftian and very strange.
It's like, don't go to the playground. It's off limits. There's been a report of blah, blah, blah. Like, there are wild dogs out. If your pets are out, be careful because... Yeah, it has that sort of like creepy, and they have music playing and stuff. But what are some of how do the other ones sort of handle?
Some of them are just sort of retell, which I guess is sort of cheating, but some of them are like retellings of, horror stories.
Kind of like a horror moth kind of project.
Yeah, exactly. But and I can't remember the name of it, but there's one really great one that is a sort of a monthly or maybe weekly podcast. It's just like a scary narrated radio play basically every week. It's really, really great.
Cool.
Comics,
I'm definitely going to
too.
look into those. That sounds cool.
But and you review comics too.
I do, yeah.
So
Comics, of course, yeah.
Another medium.
I don't know if I've ever been spooked out by any comics.
I think Walking Dead is pretty like.
Well,
I found the comics
tense and intense.
I found the comics more like kind of frightening, and I like the pacing. I care about the characters. I found more tension and release in the graphic novel versus the TV show.
Right, and that gets back to what we were talking about with The Stand. Really, it's that like the good horror comics.
They want you to care about the characters.
Yeah, I think that there are two styles of horror comics right now that I've seen sort of in the past year that I've been doing this. There's three. One is just not great horror comics, but which there are plenty of. But then there are ones that really want you to invest in the characters and invest in the story. And then there are ones that want to just be as insane as possible. My favorite, it's kind of horror right now. One of my favorite comics is Mars Attacks Judge Dredd.
Oh, wow. Is it a real crossover?
It's a real
those?
crossover, yeah. It's by IDW, and it's just as insane as it sounds like it should be, yeah. So.
It's like, well, we got these properties. Mash, mash, mash.
Well, they're the best of that for sure, but
That's great.
Or the worst, but
So, I mean, that's kind of something too. Have you guys read or have you reviewed the sort of like Creep Show, but going back like the Creepy Tales, that sort of like classic pulp?
Those are getting a big reprinting right now. That's sort of seeing a big
EW,
renaissance.
right?
Eerie and Creepy and Tales from the Crypt are getting reprinted, as well as collections from specific artists are getting reprinted, and so we're seeing there's a big resurgence of that. And there's a new one of them is coming out like as new issues, and they'll have in the same style these like creepy comics, and then one of all of them in there will be an original, an old sort of vintage comic. So
Cool.
Again, I don't think I've ever been scared by a comic.
Even someone jumped out at you with a comic. Yeah.
Like I was a dog, like piddling on the carpet. Bad, Keith, bad. No. Get back to your crate.
All right. Well, let's seg into the scary picks that we have this week.
Ooh,
that
seg.
aren't
I like
comics.
your use of seg. Did everyone say what's new? Mary had the camera. You had the okay.
I think we went through the whole spiel. So let's jump into our picks.
Why, Cock? Do I need a reason? I told a good joke, and this is the best ever. The joke on the children. But there's a better reason. You don't really know much about Halloween. Halloween. Between the real and the unreal. The dead might be looking in.
You've got to believe me!
The last great one took place 3,000 years ago when the hills ran red. Witchcraft. To us, it was a way of controlling our environment.
Stop! Stop it!
The world's going to change tonight, Doctor. I'm glad you'll be able to watch it. And happy Halloween.
So this week, I picked for my scary pick the film Halloween 3 from 1982, directed by Tommy Lee Wallace. And I didn't tell you guys this when I sort of put this out there, but this is, for better or worse, for some reason, this is my all-time favorite horror movie.
Oh wow,
Yeah,
good.
This is my favorite movie of all favorite horror movie of all time.
Awesome.
It's insane. It's totally
Yeah.
weird. So it's Halloween 3, and Halloween 1, of course, is about stars Jamie Lee Curtis as Laurie Strode, who's being sort of stalked by Michael Meyers, her brother, who's coming back to kill her.
Wearing an inside-out William Shatner mask.
Wearing an inside-out William Shatner mask. The scariest part of that movie, definitely. Halloween 2 picks up moments later, I think like seconds after Halloween 1.
that's right, I forgot that,
And it's
yeah.
a continuation of that. And Michael Myers continues to chase, and it's become this great franchise, this great sort of property. And Halloween 3 has nothing to do with Michael Myers or Laurie Strode or the doctor in it, Dr. Loomis. It's completely
Totally different story.
Totally different story. In fact, and I really like that they did this. There's a mention of a horror movie marathon in the movie in Halloween 3, and the movie that they're playing is Halloween.
Yeah.
So because of that, this movie, and the full title is Halloween 3: Season of the Witch. And because of that, because there's no Michael Myers in it, it was just absolutely panned, considered a complete flop, made the least money out of any Halloween movie that's ever been made, and generally just considered bad. But I don't really think that's fair, because I think that just because it said Halloween 3, the expectations were very different and too high.
Not too high,
not
just
too high,
different.
just different,
Yeah, for
right.
something different. Yeah, because
Totally.
I think that this is. I love this movie. I think it's better than the
I
other
agree.
ones. But go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I agree, and I
Derail
think
you.
that is a sentiment that will get you sort of scolded in certain horror fan circles, but I don't care. This is a
Yeah.
great movie, right?
Yeah.
And it's been said that if this just wasn't called Halloween 3, it would have been done fine. But so the
I
basic
think it should have just been called Silver Shamrock.
Silver Shamrock, yeah,
The movie.
Well, that's a question. Was it... Because I know... So John Carpenter, did he have a hand in the first Halloween movies?
John Carpenter, yeah, he directed, I believe, both, or at least definitely the first.
So, because he did the music
Right.
for this one.
He did the music for this one, yeah.
And
he
I
was-
think he had like a production credit as well.
Yeah, he had a production credit for this. And the idea behind it was that the sort of first Halloween movie is about a scary event that happens on Halloween.
On Halloween.
And so that is supposed to be the plot of all of these Halloween movies that they wanted
They
to...
could go anywhere.
Yeah.
Based on that theme. Yeah.
Exactly. They wanted to turn it into a series of films
Like
that,
an anthology.
yeah, about Halloween night. And this one, if it would have been a success, would have done that. And they said that, I read somewhere, maybe just Wikipedia, but I read somewhere that the next film that they were going to do was going to be like a ghost story on Halloween. And it would just sort of have, the only thing tying it together is that it'd be called Halloween. You could expect a certain like quality from it. And it would be a yearly, I think was the planned movie. But it didn't work out that way. But nevertheless, we got this really great, really weird little movie. And the sort of basic plot of it is that it opens to a man running through a parking lot, holding a mask, a Halloween mask in his hand, and he's being chased by somebody, and he is running for his life. Gets to this gas station, collapses, gets brought to a hospital where we meet the main character, Dr. Chalice, I think his last name is, yeah. And Dr. Chalice is played by Tom Atkins, one of sort of a horror movie icon, just like the classic, like early 80s, like late 70s, early 80s beefy dude,
Kind of like
He's just-
Rutger Hauer was the guy for the 90s or whatever, for your Jack Frosts and those kind of movies.
Exactly. Yeah. yeah. Tom Atkins was like your guy for your like Dr. Dan Chalice. Like, you're a drunk. And he's like, so what? He's like, I got a mustache. So what? But he is the doctor in charge when this guy comes in. The guy is pretty soon after done away with by these people in suits. And he meets this guy who died. This guy's daughter comes, whose name is Ellie, and Ellie and Dr. Chalice sort of team up based on curiosity and also mutual weird immediate attraction. They kind of go on this quest to figure out what's going on. The link to that is this company Silver Shamrock that makes these masks. And they sort of track down Silver Shamrock. They pose as people trying to order more masks. And the masks all throughout the movie, it's this ongoing theme. These are the most popular masks. It's like
Every kid has to have
every
it.
kid has
And
to
it's
have
the
one of
like
these.
skeleton, pumpkin, and witch.
Yeah.
And I had the pumpkin mask when I was younger. That same exact
same
mask.
style?
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Huh.
That like latex.
Yeah,
thing.
they've just released these as sort of art objects now. You can get them. They're like $80 each, you know, but
Wow.
they're beautiful. And this was done by Don Post, actually. They were made by Don Post, who's sort of a very well-known name in the horror movie industry for generally doing monster effects and monster makeup. But he made these masks to be like these very...
Did he cameo? And there's a moment where they kind of show you this factory floor. Do you
I
think he
wonder if he's
cameoed
there.
in the
I wouldn't be surprised.
in the mask making factory?
I would definitely... That would be great, yeah. And that's great, too. You sort of see the company. The town that it's in is this little town called Santa Mira, which is like very much a company town.
But it's also like he's transplanted all Irish people into this
Yes.
town, and it's run by an Irishman.
Yeah.
It's called Santa Mira.
It's called Santa Mira, but it's all Irish. It's a very very inclusive town or exclusive town, and it's very, very, very bizarre. And Connor Cochran, I think, is the main sort of the head of Silver Shamrock, and he's the one seeing over everything, and he's just the actor playing him just eats up the scenery. Every scene that he's in, you can't take your eyes away from him.
Yeah.
And without really giving away too much of the ending, because even though this was made in '82, I really, really, really think it's worth a watch. Things get really crazy. There is an international plot of mystery going on, and we can decide later on if we want to spoil it. That's fine, but for now,
Well, you can mention that part.
Yeah, 'cause it's so insane.
The theft, the heist. Yeah,
The
I think you
heist,
can mention
yeah.
that.
So there's part of the magic that's going on, and this is sort of a witchcraft story. These like Irish sort of witches, basically, and part of where they're getting their power from is that they have stolen and secretly transported one of the stones of
The
Stonehenge.
19th stone,
Yeah.
the Stonehenge.
One
yeah.
of the stones
And
of
it's
Stonehenge.
and you only know this because there's a throwaway like news report
One second
like
news
for a
report.
second in the beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
And then they just kind of it's in the background. They actually maybe mention it like for another minute near the end. Like
Yeah.
that's why we have the stone.
Well,
Yeah.
they show it later too.
Yeah,
They show
they-
like guys chipping at it
Yeah.
in the workshop. Yeah.
And they never answer the biggest question of the movie, which is how did they transport it? Connor Cochran says,
they use
like,
dark magic, man.
Yeah, Connor Cochran says, like, we had a heck of a time getting it over here. Like, and that's all you get. Like, we're like, you wouldn't believe how we got it over here. Like, so that's all you get. But man, I love this movie. It's so insane.
So Mary, what'd you think of Season of the Witch, Halloween 3?
Well, I had never seen any of the Halloween movies, actually. I knew about them. So this Halloween 3 is my first Halloween movie, so I didn't
That's
go
amazing.
into it thinking, oh, this is going to have Jamie Lee Curtis and everything. But it's really fun. I mean, for me, it's fun for the campiness factor. It's I love the opening scene. Is there something about this and Poltergeist 3 too that even though we're talking about kind of all these like cheesy factors about them, there's something really like naturalistic about. Maybe it's the time period and.
It feels very honest, right? It's
Yeah.
earnest, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. And you get that right away from the opening scene of just this guy running and, you don't really know what's going on. And, but yeah, pretty soon we're introduced to the doctor who reminded me of Garth Marenghi because he's got the red shirt underneath his like lab coat and the mustache.
I love that he's the main hero of the movie.
Yeah.
That's like
Yeah.
middle-aged guy.
Yeah, he's like 45 and the
Divorced.
Right, and the 22-year-old daughter who just lost her dad immediately like starts having sex with him because so there's definitely these kind of unbelievable aspects of it that aren't so naturalistic, but it's part of the campiness, and but yeah, it's really weird. I mean, I don't know if it was supposed to make sense, but there's this whole like computer kind of theme with the magic. I sort of took that as just like, it's the 80s and there's computers now.
Yeah,
and
it's updating our
There's
magic.
there's sort of the visual explanation of how the sort of bad magic is happening is that there are scientists putting chips of the Stonehenge just directly on
Into the
top
mask.
of directly on top of computer chips. Just like, nope, this goes right on top
Oh,
of
is
this
that?
computer.
See, I didn't
That's
even
what he's
get
doing.
that.
Because there's little computer chips in these silver buttons on these masks.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
didn't notice that he
And
was
what they're
putting the
doing is-
actual piece of Stonehenge on the computer
Yeah,
chip.
I
they're,
didn't
they're
get that
chipping away
either.
Stonehenge and
Okay.
then just boop, this goes right on the computer chip. I've seen this movie 8 times.
That's awesome.
So if there's any questions, I can answer them for you. for
But
sure.
I like how this, in contrast to Poltergeist 3, I think it really does try to tell you, like, this is kind of how this works.
Right.
And it maybe
There
it doesn't
are
all
rules.
quite come together, but yeah, there's these rules, and you got to kind of figure it out as you go. So I enjoyed that aspect of it.
But I never did really. It felt like I was never really given a good explanation of why they want to do it.
And this
That's
is
the
actually,
thing
I've
that-
thought
Yeah.
about this a lot. I've thought about this a lot. Why do we not get an explanation? And, I love this movie so much that I am now on my, 7th, 8th viewing, starting to read into it probably way deeper than anyone should or has
Go for it,
up
man.
till now. But it's like, it's almost like, to me, it just feels like a commentary on the horror movie plot. The main, Connor Cochran is asked at the end, why are you doing it? And his only answer is, do I need a reason? And and that's the line, And then he starts talking about, some things with ritual sacrifices and stuff. But the main punch of this movie is scary things happen on Halloween. Do I need a reason to
Right.
kill all the,
Right.
To melt
Right.
the heads of kids and
let's
have
just say
snakes
it.
come out of their eyes.
Spoiler, to melt the heads of children. Yeah.
And then have snakes kill their parents.
Yep. Exactly. Very specific.
Well,
The,
snakes that crawl out of their heads of the melted kids and then go kill the parents.
Exactly.
So, well, I kind of read it too that this Cochran guy, you had a sense that he maybe was kind of living, like his life was being extended by this ritual. Like, yeah, when he's talking about back in the day, this is how he did it. This is how he did it back in the day.
That's interesting. I've never read it.
And so
like
that
that, yeah.
he's this prankster god
Yes.
kind of thing. And
when
these-
he's finally tricked at the end, he gives the slow applaud sort of
yeah,
to the
like, hey,
you got
you
me.
got me. And he even kind of like dies smiling
Yeah.
with this weird like, joke's on me. And the whole sky is lit. But at the same time, he knows his gag is still probably going off.
Right.
But so I don't know. I guess I saw that was sort of the ritual sacrifice is them maintaining their power base or feeding
Right.
their god or whatever. Which
Yeah, because while I was watching it, I was like, I love that. Like Mary said, it wasn't just kind of like this is happening. They really went through the
First
process
review
of
this.
showing you, even showing them testing it in the
Right.
lab and showing this is how we're going to put it through the airwaves and all this
Right.
stuff. And they really take pains to show you this, but in the end, I just kind of felt like, well, that's an awful lot of trouble to.
Right. You could just bomb the whole country if you wanted to. So.
You could just drive through the neighborhood and shoot trick-or-treaters with a shotgun and it would cost the same amount.
I thought it was interesting. You actually could have, if you took out some of the murder and death volume, and I mean, this could have been an episode of The X-Files.
Definitely.
This could have been an episode of Doctor Who. I mean, it's this sort of procedural, like, the couple, like, something crazy, like, cold open leads you into a mystery. Now, the guys whose job it is to follow the mysteries, for some reason, drunk, like, ex-wife problem doctor guy who's just working one more shift, man, is the guy to deal with this whole thing. And his, sexy sidekick comes along with him. And
Well, that's good motivation.
but
Let's
it's,
face it.
I mean, if it was a Doctor Who episode, you have a doctor, you have a companion, and off they go to
Right.
solve the mystery. And it's this weird, like, for the longest time, I was like, I think Season of the Witch is like Halloween is part of the joke, that it isn't really a Halloween movie, and Season of the Witch is part of the joke that it's really a whole robot movie.
Yeah.
And that there's no
Which
real,
we haven't even mentioned yet.
so
but
you don't
yeah,
even
there
need
are.
witches in this
Right.
whole thing. Like it does.
Yeah,
that
the
was
Season of the
unnecessary.
Witch was like interesting naming.
Yeah.
It's like it's like the spell is basically turning everyone's insides to deadly snakes.
Well, it's not even a spell, too. It's a spell combined with technology,
Right.
combined with like radio waves or
Right.
TV
waves. Yeah. And
But I think it's just very interestingly done. And so Carpenter didn't have much to do with this other than the music.
executive producer credit, and apparently he did a fair amount of the music in this movie.
That's amazing because it really feels like a Carpenter movie in the best way. Like one of my all-time favorite movies is They Live, and that's, I mean, as Carpenter as it gets. But with it, there's a certain feeling of camp or cheesiness. I can't really put my finger on it, but this kind of has a little less, but it still definitely feels like Carpenter to me.
Definitely.
But I guess maybe his music just definitely just is all it takes.
It just heightens it.
Yeah.
This director,
His super synth.
yeah, it's so synthy. It's so computery. The opening credit sequence
Yeah.
of the pumpkin being drawn on the computer is amazing. But this director, Tommy Lee Wallace, actually directed a bunch of stuff, like a bunch of sequels to horror movies and stuff. But his probably the other biggest known thing that he directed is the It miniseries.
Oh,
for It,
wow.
which the first half of is, I mean, some of the best
Yeah.
horror television
definitely.
ever, horror film ever made.
They all float down
Yeah,
here.
it's just so insane.
Yeah.
So there's a few like weird moments in it that are fun and funny. Like there's a dude who lights himself on fire and his car explodes, and everyone just kind of like from the hospital just kind of slowly converges on this burning car. They're like, "Oh man, this is terrible."
Oh, I gotta work a double tonight.
What did they say? Like drunk or drugs?
Yeah, and it's not like they're not in like emergency room mode. Like, oh my god,
No.
call the fire department, everyone get out here. They aren't running towards him to save him. None of that. And they're not running away from it. Like, what if there's a secondary explosion?
Right.
They're just kind of like, hands in the pocket. Like, damn shame. That was a nice car, kind of moment. And then it's a little like one of these weird kind of things where you have these masks that are going all over the country, if not the world, and they're produced at this tiny little like factory by a handful of people. It's like mass distribution,
Yeah.
local production.
Made in the USA, man.
Yeah.
That label counts.
That does. Silver Shamrock.
That mask shop was cool though, or
It
the
was
workshop,
cool.
the factory. That was really neat.
Then all the masks glow in the dark. That was an important part to the thing, and they don't really show it, but it was kind of, I thought
Yeah.
that was a good, it's important for things to glow in the dark.
Especially in the 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here's a question about this movie. What did you guys do? Like, I mean, this is being sort of children of the 80s. What did you guys do for Halloween?
In the 80s?
Or when you were younger? Like when you actually celebrated
Well, for
Halloween?
me, that would have been the 80s. Well, in the 90s, I guess. I don't know. I got dressed up and went trick-or-treating. Like every American kid.
It looked an awful lot like E.T.
Yeah.
If you remember
when you were younger?
Yeah, like when
You looked an awful lot like E.T.
No, the Halloween scene is almost exactly like I remember.
Flashlights and parents and
Children,
little kids.
yeah, and you know, we didn't grow up in a suburban area with sidewalks and stuff, but we would drive to my cousin's house that was like that. You know what I mean? And we'd have that neighborhood to go around, and it was, you know, it would start right at, you know, it was still daylight, and it would turn to night, and that's one of the amazing things about those early Spielberg movies is they just felt so authentic, like E.T. I watched that and I'm like, that is, other than the alien, that is my childhood almost exactly, you know. You knew the guy whose family was divorced, and it was still kind of a newish kind of thing then, you know, and the teenager cussed at the other kids, you know. It's just it's cool.
Yeah, I actually had sort of a pretty different Halloween experience. I still have pretty young parents. They had me when they were pretty young, and so when we were, 8, they were in their late 20s, so we had a lot of Halloween parties. We went to a lot of like family parties, but it wasn't like a family like, let's have Halloween. It was like a party. And I remember being like young and like little and being dressed as like Where's Waldo and like bouncing around while like my adults were dressed up and having this like what we now have as like Halloween parties. And it's crazy for me to now imagine like a kid running around while we're like drinking and carrying on, but that was us. Like, so it was a totally.
Where was it? Where were you?
Suburbs of Philadelphia.
All right.
So King of Prussia is the town that I was from.
It's called King of Prussia?
It's called King of Prussia. Yeah,
that is a
3
great
words.
town name.
Yeah.
Wow.
Very cool. Did you any of these Halloweens get to go out and actually trick or treat?
Yeah, we would go out every night. So every Halloween, wherever we were going, there would be, if it was just us, we'd go with our parents, or if there were other kids or cousins or things, we would go out with them while the party was kind of raging, I guess. So.
Wow.
Cool.
And I just remember I was a kid during the golden age of it, I guess, because we would literally bring back just buckets and buckets of candy.
Yeah.
So much candy, piles and piles. And my parents would be like, we have to go through all that before you eat any of it.
And make sure we get the stuff we get our share.
Razor blades in it.
I definitely pushed the candy consumption end of things pretty hard. Like we would hit our neighborhood, walk 2 neighborhoods over.
Yep.
And we would also have a couple extra costumes in our bag. So you'd be like...
Yeah. Or not even a costume, just a mask.
Yeah. Or a sheet.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, so normal costume. Okay. Sheet. Okay. Mask. With the sheet around my normal costume to like hide me or whatever, or a third mask or whatever you'd want, and
you do that. You go to the house that has like Reese's cups and go, oh man, we're coming back to this house.
Well, the other big thing to do too is like usually you have parents who their kids are having candy come home anyways. They don't want this candy around either. So if you run out at the end of the night and do a circuit, you can pick up like, hey, Mrs. Walker, you don't need that bag of Snickers. Like, come on, check it out. And then it just unloads the excess on you, and you can...
I don't know. I mean, that was never the case. Everyone was always out of candy by like, I don't know, 9:30.
I really like imagining, though, like a 7-year-old John Holt smooth-talking Mrs. Walters, and they're like, come on, Mrs. Walters, be cool.
Come on, baby. Come on. What you
Little Johnny Holt, you're rolling here like the fog.
The fog.
You're getting an apple.
17-year-old? Is that what you said? I think the last, like, Halloweening I did was probably like 15 or something. That was like the last, but that was definitely
a
like
cutoff
more
that you had to do.
Eggs and whatever. So,
do you ever watch Regular Show?
Yeah, I watched a few episodes of it.
So they had a Halloween episode, but the big Blue Jay guy, he had the best costume where he dressed up like a dad, and he had this belt with a bunch of like supposed to be like little balloons, but it looked like there were like 5 kids all around him dressed like ghosts. So he'd walk up and they put candy in all of it because all the kids had their own bucket. So
that's pretty great.
Yeah.
I just remembered something else that I did for Halloween that was totally cool and awesome. When I lived in Germany, I was about 10 years old. My dad was stationed there in the Air Force. We lived in a little German town called Frankenstein. And we lived in like a ravine on a hill. There was a castle ruin behind us. And we had this cool house that just, because it was on a hill, there was room behind the house, but it was just like a passageway behind the house because there was a hill that then, went up behind it. So
was
it wasn't
there like a stone wall?
Yes.
Oh, all right.
Well, it might have just been concrete actually,
right, okay.
But so we would have a Halloween party every year and invite my friends over, invite my German friend, and but Halloween wasn't a big thing there, so it was cool for her. But we'd decorate all around, and we got all these masks and stuffed these dummies and put them all around outside the house. And my dad would swing. We'd walk in the little path.
The walkway, yeah.
Yeah, in the tunnel, and my dad would swing ghosts down, and gonna scare us. And
That's awesome.
but yeah, that was a cool time.
I find it's interesting that Halloween isn't a big deal here. Isn't as big a deal in Europe. Julian has said the same thing growing up in France. When I see America as being so Puritan that I would imagine, especially in the 50s and stuff, when Halloween, I imagine, was taking root. Why would it have taken root here and not? Because it obviously came from some European country that had converted to Christianity in the after the fall of the Roman Empire.
Yeah, I really don't know. That's a good question.
To bring it back to this, I think there was basically the Irish witches that were escaping Ireland and making small towns
Right.
In Northern California, and pretty much brought Halloween with them as a way to eventually kill all the children in the world. And,
Right. They name their towns sort of more Italian-sounding names or
Right.
Spanish-sounding names to throw everyone off the trail,
Right.
Santa Mira, but...
That's true.
So also, this is something else that kind of coming back into the movie. The masks were fantastic, and Halloween masks were always like an exciting as a young kid kind of thing. And this is another like putting kids in danger horror movie where there isn't really a child protagonist. There's one kid that
It's
you kind
just
of see.
all children.
Yeah, I mean, you
It's
basically
the idea of children.
yeah. So you have his son and daughter of this guy who's estranged from his wife or whatever.
Yeah,
and
we don't see that. We maybe see them a little bit at the beginning, right?
Beginning and in the middle a little bit, but...
Yeah, and you the ex-wife is just this like
nagging
nag
voice,
to him, so you just get the feeling that he doesn't care about them at all, except, at some point he finally like calls them and says, "Hey, don't put those masks on." But you just hear her through the phone saying, "Rah, rah, rah, rah."
And and that, I like that. That's actually I feel like that's a nice little beat that reckons back or goes back to the beginning where he comes in to the house with these two lame masks.
like
you
a
don't really
like a
see
bunny,
them,
and they're like
but it's
the plastic.
the plastic half mask of like a bunny and a dog.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, we got these. Mom got us, and the mom's just like, too late. Or no, she goes, nice try. Like, so good.
Yeah, and I love that the dad is just like, oh, when I was a kid, this would have been a great mask.
Yeah.
But those half masks with the plastic bodysuit were like, that was a standard go-to for years. Like, I am Batman right now.
I wish people could have seen the costume that you had a couple years ago when you played off of that fact. Like, they used to make just these silly, for people out there who are too young to remember this, they used to make these, it would be a Casper the Friendly Ghost costume that you'd buy, but instead of it being a costume that looks like Casper the Friendly Ghost, it would just have like a cheap mask that looked like Casper, and then the rest of it was like a
plastic
frock.
schmuck. Yeah,
it was like a schmuck with like in a really cheap plasticky. If you got on fire, it would just melt to your skin. But it would just have the printed, like basically like a poster printed on this thing. So you were really just a walking billboard for Casper the Friendly Ghost, but you couldn't wait to get that costume on.
And be Casper.
Yeah, it was, we were dumb.
Yeah, it was pretty great. So I made a deer hunter.
Yeah, so John made one based off of that same concept, but the deer hunter, where he had it was
a weird mask. But I think kind of this one too, and this is another horror thing in this movie. No matter what they do, and this guy works his butt off to like. Yeah. Again, if this was the X-Files, by the third thing that he's done to like try to stop everything, that would have worked. Okay.
Right.
Or they would have flown off in a black helicopter and there'd be a little question, but for the most part, it'd be kind of clear that they contain the situation. But, in this, it's just sort of like, oh God. Like
that's the end.
That's the
like,
end. Like it's
the end
done.
is him screaming, like basically, yeah.
Much more, that's the sort of like, that's the kind of ending that I enjoy in a horror movies where I walk away like, it's all like just,
the bad guy won.
Yeah.
Well, that's always a great ending when you start the way this started with somebody out of their element, totally in over their head for reasons that they can't even really explain. I mean, his reason for investigating this is like, nobody murders someone in my hospital. and gets away with it. Like, that's it. So, I don't know
Especially if it's the dad of this hot lady.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. Was she a replicant the entire time? Because the first time you see her, I was kind of like, wait, is she even real? Like, I kind of knew that, like, there's the henchmen guys who are kind of automatons.
Right.
And I, right from the beginning, was like, I didn't know if she was like, I know she got replaced.
Right.
At some point, possibly, but I was sort of wondering if she was already an automaton from the beginning, like a plant to get this guy sucked in.
No, we won't know until Harrison Ford comes with his little camera thing.
I think he was a replicant, too.
Yeah.
The whole time. Yeah.
You can only tell from the origami little swans.
Exactly. Yeah. I definitely campy. There are parts that were just like super fun, and the whole concept, like near the end, was creepy, and that's what I like about these kind of movies, is the sort of creep out factor after some camp.
Yeah, this is one that I remember very specifically from my childhood catching, and even rewatching it, I mean, so many shots that were still so distinctive in my memory is something else.
Yeah,
it's really, really good pick. Thank you, Giaco.
Oh, thank you, guys.
It's interesting. We both went with part 3.
We did, yeah. It's a conspiracy.
Yeah. And so yeah, 1982, the Halloween
Part 3.
Halloween 3, Season of the Witch.
All right, check it out.
I haven't much time. Any moment now he may come in, and when he does, I'm going to kill him. It's him or me. And I'm going to do my best to make it him. Or maybe it sounds crazy to you. I guess it does. Would have sounded crazy to me a few days ago when I was with Whitney on the yacht. I was on a pleasure trip. A pleasure trip. How could I or anyone realize then the horror and torment I was to go through? How was I to know of Varn and the Death Swamp and the hounds? How was I to know of Zaroff? Think of it. It was only 4 nights ago that the ship went down. We've been talking about this island, Ship Trap Island, Whitney said it was called in the charts. I was sleepy and started on down below to turn in. I was mixing myself a nightcap when I looked up and saw it. A tremendous reef racing at us out of the fog.
So my pick this week is The Most Dangerous Game. It is a short story published in 1924. It's by Richard Connell, who, according to Wikipedia, was a very successful writer, prolific, wrote a lot of short stories, even did screenwriting, but remains best known for this story, The Most Dangerous Game. It had a movie made after it in the 30s. I never saw it. But this was in a short story collection we had growing up, and I remember my parents reading this to me and to each other. And it's about it's very short, and it's about a big game hunter who is shipwrecked on a Caribbean island. I think he's on his way to go hunting somewhere, and he finds on this island a sort of a mansion, and this wealthy man takes this guy in, and tells him that he's also a hunter, but he got so good at hunting that eventually he got bored, and so now he hunts the most dangerous game, which is men. He doesn't talk about hunting women. I think it's just men. But I don't know. He doesn't really get too much into the victims. Well, I think he says they're basically like other shipwrecked sailors, and he kind of rigs the shipwrecks to happen.
And he seems like he's pretty equal, like race-wise. He kind of just like lists off. He's like, yeah, Chinese guys, black guys, white guys.
Yeah, he's super...
I go for them all.
Equal opportunity,
Yeah.
killer of men.
Yeah, but he definitely... so he definitely thinks that he's better, though, than all of these people that he's hunting. He's like, oh, they're just...
So when was it? 24?
1924.
Yeah, it came out in 1924. It was also under the name The Hounds of Zaroff. So that's the other thing. The guy, the hunter on this island, he's Russian, I think, right?
He's a Cossack, so he's...
Yeah, that's Russian.
He's Russian, but it's sort of like... This is 1924, so it's post-revolution, and this guy is sort of... has escaped Russia because he was a
lot of the Cossacks were high up in the Tsarist royalist army, so they were.
And he's joined by Ivan, who is a Lucaire. He basically the Lucaire or whatever. There's this whip that was used to like punish people and so he was the guy who wielded the whip. He's a torturer basically and an executioner.
Yeah, and I just picture him as being this like big, beefy guy.
Hagrid.
Yeah. Well, no, not Hagrid.
No, he had dogs. He was gigantic, and he rode a motorcycle.
Well, the dogs belong to
flies.
the main guy. But yeah, he would hunt with these hounds, so that's why the alternate title was the Hounds of Zaroff. His name was General Zaroff, and you just have to read it and find out what happens in the very end, I guess. Well, we can spoil it too. We've spoiled the other ones, but he ends up hunting his guest because his guest has no choice but to be hunted, and he makes a deal with all the people he hunts that
3 days.
Yeah, you have 3 days, and if I don't get you in 3 days, you can go. But he hasn't lost yet. But will he lose this time? You'll have to read the story to find out.
Yeah. So it's basically a guy falls off a boat, swims to this island.
I know, I just summarized all this for you.
So he's smoking a pipe, and he drops his pipe.
Yeah.
It's a beer root pipe.
What?
And he jumps in after it?
No,
No.
sort of.
He
He
just
reaches
falls,
for it
yeah,
and falls in.
Oh,
so.
yeah, it's totally dumb how he...
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, oh no, yeah. But he's also this guy who's written a lot of books about hunting and is an avid, like, sportsman who's fallen on this island. So
The protagonist,
the
right?
reason why Zaroff's like, tonight's hunt was boring. My malaise is back or whatever.
Right.
And so he's like, you might be a good guy to hunt. Like, at first he wants this guy to go hunting with him. And it's like, he's found a kindred spirit to share the hunt with him.
Right.
And maybe that will bring excitement, but then he sort of twists.
Yeah, and it's all very civilized, and he gives him fine wine and good food and everything, and thinks, and when the protagonist protests that, you can't do this is murder, that you're murdering these people, and he scoffs at that and says, oh, you're so old-fashioned, this is serious game hunting,
I love those old stories like that where from the very beginning they're hanging out with the guy, and
Right.
it's kind of like the beginning of the old Dracula things where, the clerk goes and hangs out at the house with Dracula and stuff. You don't see much stuff like that anymore, sadly, where it's like, no, this is the bad guy. You're hanging out with him,
Right.
and it's only a matter of time before.
Yeah,
It's like a bunch of kids going party with the swamp monster. He's doing like cake stands and stuff.
Yeah. It's like you hanging out at Jason's house.
You've offended the swampman.
Yeah.
How dare you? You left those plastic solo cups
Jason,
in
why
my
do you keep
forest.
sharpening that machete? Isn't it sharp enough?
He just
But,
doesn't answer.
No.
Because he doesn't talk.
But I think I like this story because there's a lot of like sort of build up and anticipation, and there doesn't it still leaves things to the imagination and doesn't spell out everything, especially like exactly what happens in the end.
Yeah, I really liked that about this story. I thought that if it was written today, this would be like a 245-page novel.
Right.
With every scene, every like pages about survival and getting through these problems, and long intro, and I love that it's just like, I love to hunt. Oh, I fell off a boat. It's just like, it just gets right into it. It just gets right on with it. The same with the Velt that we talked about last week, just sort of starts and finishes.
Yeah, and they're both about animals eating people, because he has these hounds that will often eat the prey.
Well, I that's what's so cool about those. This guy is way older than the Bradbury era, but these workaday writers that just like churn out hundreds and hundreds of stories over their career, there's something about like the craft of it that they just nail it. I mean, and maybe I'm not being fair to people who are working now, but I just feel like you said, if that was to come out today, they would be like, well, let's make it a trilogy, because then we can do a whole movie. It's a trilogy movie. You know what I mean? There would be kind of in like I said, maybe I'm not being fair. Maybe I'm being looking back with rose-colored glasses at a past I was never a part of. But reading a Bradbury story, it's just so solid. Like it's this guy. He sits down, he has his coffee, and he writes all day long. That's his life. That's his work, and that's what he did.
Well, I think
he died.
what's difficult is that there are fewer venues for the short story. I mean, you're talking. There were magazines, like we're saying,
true.
when Bradbury's getting written up in the Saturday Evening Post. More people are reading the Post than are watching TV back then.
Yeah,
in 1950.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but more people are reading blogs now.
Right, but that's a different. But the monetizing a blog is very different than how short stories are. Like you could write a short story and get
those guys
paid.
weren't making money. They just had to keep doing it. I mean,
if you're getting in the Post though,
Lovecraft never made any money.
But
off
see,
of
but
his
he was
stuff.
a pulp. Like he was pulp, and he was living with his parent, with his aunts
he
or
was
whatever.
Rich. Yeah, I mean his family
he
was
had
rich.
money, but he at a certain point for those pulp guys, it was output where you were at. So it's just like straight volume for a lot of them. But for like Bradbury and I think this guy, they were more well regarded. So it's like illustrators too.
Yeah.
Like you had your pulp illustrators, but you had the 20s and 30s, which were the golden age. We had, illustrators in fancy suits going to dinners and stuff. That was the thing. There was money there because it was
Society of Illustrators,
the entertainment.
Well, and also up until pretty recently, writing short stories and publishing them in magazines were one of the best ways to get a book deal, to get a novel deal.
Yeah.
But even now, writers are saying that if you want to write novels, just write novels.
Yeah.
Don't worry about what Stephen King was doing 20 years ago. Like, if you want to write short stories, but getting a short story published isn't as big of a deal now towards getting a novel. Right. At least that's what they say on Writing Excuses podcast.
Well, and I think again it's partially because you can go out on a blog and stuff, and there's a certain craftsmanship and people who are stronger at the short story format, but it almost has to be, I'd think, monetized by you write your novel and then you're doing your short story collection is more. It's like being a painter or something, but your audience is going to be smaller. There are fewer people who straight up read short story collections nowadays. Like, when was the last time someone like handed you a short story collection instead of like Harry Potter or something? You know what I mean?
There are books of essays out all the time.
There are books of essays, but those are even edited collections of multiple authors writing around one subject.
Not always, yeah.
A lot of the time, I mean, a lot of them, that's what they're gathering. Like George R.R. Martin is working, he has sort of, here's this world that he's sort of edits and creates, and all these people write stories and he puts them in the collection. So that those kind of things, that may be the venue now for mass consumption of short stories. I think it's harder to find them.
I think the venue probably is TV for today's equivalent of
for people who are writing. But that's a different kind of thing, and you're definitely working within genre. So
Giaco, had you read this as a kid?
Yeah, this was assigned to me at some point in my late middle or early high school career. Was reading Most Dangerous Game.
Before you retired from high school.
Before I retired, my early career,
yeah.
before I moved on. And it's so funny. I really haven't read this in a long time, and I really enjoyed it. But I can't help when I read this or think about this story. All I can think about is the film The Pest with John Leguizamo, which was like basically like a frenetic, insane, when he was in his like epoch, like just being weird interpretation of this movie. It's so bizarre.
I never saw The Pest. I didn't realize it had a...
It is the most dangerous game. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It's really weird.
Well, I couldn't help but think of Hard Target. That is a version of this movie, a version of this story as well, starring Jean-Claude Van Damme. And it's a great movie. John Woo's first one here in the United States. Wilford Brimley's in it.
So there are a couple like modern, like the Hunger Games, and then before that Battle Royale definitely draw from that sort of like people hunting one another sort of.
Even
those
Predator.
ideas. Predator, yeah.
Kind of.
Well, I was thinking about that a lot, especially Battle Royale, that how much of that really takes from this. It's the island, the very specific rules, this being presented as a sort of game.
Yeah.
Definitely really sort of calls back to this. For sure.
Mm-hmm. And in Battle Royale, I mean, they just throw you right in as well, just like in this.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like, go.
Yep, you're
Yeah.
off.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting because now we're playing all these video games, so it's, I think something like Hunger Games or Battle Royale speaks to us because we're kind of like, oh, that's what it would be like if we were really in that game or something. Whereas this was in 1924. It's like, oh, that's what it would be like if we were the panther being hunted or something,
Well, that's something that's interesting too, is that there's sort of what would now be considered like an ecological or even like animal rights aspect to the story, where it kind of starts off with these two people who are about to go on a hunt, kind of talking about, I wonder what the jaguar thinks about while we're hunting it. Yeah. And the other guy's like, jaguars aren't even real. like he's just sort of like, they're just bags of fur and meat. We'll just shoot them. And the other guy's like, well, maybe they have fear and pain. He's like, why would you even think that, idiot? And I'm going downstairs. Don't fall off the boat.
Right.
And that's sort of, that's how it happens. Like that's the extent of maybe that sort of, what does the animal feel and think? And then he becomes that animal. He becomes the hunted. So it's sort of this question of like, nowadays you wonder if it would be like, and then I started hunting hunters, is sort of the next stage for the...
Well, that's, I mean, you kind of, can I just spoil it? But,
sure.
So, probably that this is going to happen, that our protagonist wins, and in the end, he ends up ambushing the general in his mansion. So the general comes out every day and tries to find him, or every night, and almost gets him, but is foiled by the protagonist's cleverness, and he sets little traps that never quite get him. But and then the general will just end up going home to sleep and rest, and then to come back out. So at the end, he goes home, and our protagonist kind of ambushes him in his bedchamber, and they don't describe a fight, but it's implied that they fight, and the general is kind of actually pleased that the guy comes back, because he thought he was gone forever. He had seen him jump into the water, and
he's kind of disappointed.
Yeah, that he didn't get his game, and so now he's back, and he's like, okay, so
I still have a chance.
Yeah, the loser gets fed to the dogs, and the winner gets to sleep in my bed, and then the next, there's like a break, and the next line is the protagonist saying that, and it was, a really nice bed, and like it was the best bed I ever slept in. So, but now you're kind of like, well, is he gonna turn into this guy and start? Right. I don't think he is. I mean, he had such big moral qualms with what this guy was doing, but at the same time, he is a really good hunter, and he was on his way to a hunting trip.
And he just survived the thrill. So, and
right.
he himself has sort of become the murderer. So there's a question mark there.
That's true. But, you know, it's kind of self-defense.
Yeah, I don't think you can call it murder if you're
Right.
preventing
I
yourself
don't
from being
know.
eaten by dogs.
I think he could have swam away or gotten away from the island.
he
in a way.
did.
Yeah, but where do you swim to? I mean,
That's true. It just seems vindictive that he would come back to kill the guy.
Right.
In
Well,
his bedchamber.
Revenge.
yeah.
yeah, but I guess he could have just stayed hidden for a couple more days.
Like tied the guy up, put him downstairs where
And
he
the guy
puts all
must
his
have
other
boats
prey.
or something.
Yeah, but I
like-
mean, this guy's the general is a big fighter guy, so he's not gonna just go down easy.
Right.
But what's interesting is it was in 24, so it kind of makes me think if this guy is kind of reacting a little bit to Teddy Roosevelt kind of thing, because Roosevelt was a big game hunter, and then he, you know, it was well publicized and stuff, and you know, like after a while, he's just like, what else is there for me to do? You know,
Right.
But he was also a soldier in armed conflict.
Yeah, but he did that. The big game stuff happened after that. Yeah.
So Teddy Roosevelt got bored of hunting?
Well, Teddy Roosevelt was very involved with the Spanish-American War.
Right.
And he was the Secretary of the Navy or something like this. And as soon as there was like a dust up, he's like, I quit. I'm going to go fight some Spaniards. And it's, you know, he made the Rough Riders and charged off into history.
And
he had Brooks Brothers design his uniforms, which I think is a really funny detail.
Well, that's something too. Like this guy, he kind of just says like, the last time I dug this, you know, I dug in fast in France or whatever. He basically kind of hints that this guy had fought in World War One as well. That's, you know, so there's some historical elements and of the time things that he's tying in here with the Cossacks, the recent revolution.
Right, which would have been really fresh when this came out.
And this guy, this sort of like czarist escaping, it's sort of like the our German friends in Argentina kind of thing. Like that sort of like Nazi expats escaping Germany to go to, you know, Argentina or whatever. It's this guy living on an island in the middle of nowhere off of American fruit futures or whatever, and sort of this weird historical thing that it's some of the words and some of the language I think will be, I mean, they're already pretty well lost now. Like we don't use a lot of the term, like Cossack doesn't come up unless you're talking about like Feifel and Mauschwitz or whatever.
No, man, it was in GoldenEye. It was in
All right.
James Bond GoldenEye.
True.
So I think it's interesting that I guess maybe not so much in Halloween 3, but all the other of our picks for spookiness, Poltergeist 3 and The Velt and The Most Dangerous Game. Actually, you can make the case for Halloween 3 maybe, but have to deal with people who are kind of well off, who are doing very well for themselves, and this bad force comes and just kind of wrecks that all. And Halloween 3 is more, I mean, he is a doctor, but you don't really see him living in this like large life or
Lap of
anything.
luxury or anything.
Yeah, so maybe not that one so much, but I feel like sometimes there's like maybe this is because it's latching on to jealousy people might have of people who are
when they're writing it.
Oh no, well, I don't mean that the writers are jealous, but maybe they're sort of exploiting our own jealousy of like, yeah, we want to see that rich person suffer or something. And
well, I think there's also too the like, it's maybe a little of that sort of Schadenfreude kind of stuff, but there's also that that sort of like just because you have it all doesn't mean it's all going to be figured out kind of thing. Like
you can't
just
buy
because
your
you're
way
rich
out
and
of this, Tom Skerritt.
Exactly. Right. You built this big building and it's falling apart around you, Tom
just
Skerritt.
Like our studio.
Like our studio. My dropped phone. So I guess the thing that I would equate this story to in terms of scariness, and like when we were young and bringing it out, we would play like Manhunter, which was a game where usually one person or like a team of people would go out in search of everyone else at night in the dark, and there was usually a base that was like the one lit spot where the manhunter couldn't really hang around the base within view. Like if he was within eyesight of anyone, you could count because it was prison basically. So the manhunter team's job was catch everybody, have them all be in jail, and if you have them all in jail, you win. And then you find a new manhunter, start a new game. And usually the games never ended because it was just too hard. But because the other side was you could free people from jail if the manhunter wasn't going to catch you.
Yeah.
And the manhunter couldn't be in eyesight of the jail. Like if you could see him, you could start counting, and once you got to a certain point, you could just run. So there were sort of all these rules, but these sort of playing games at night and that tension of being like sought out and always kind of having to move. That, in our youth, that's how we captured that.
Yeah, definitely. And I remember very specifically playing games like that, and there was dew on the ground, so you were sliding in the grass, and you'd make that a part of your, whole...
And we would add, like, Nerf weapons at some point and kind of swords and stuff, so... But, Giaco, so you were not a fan of the Manhunter?
No, I have always, I don't know, I don't like the feeling that someone's going to get me, even, if, even if it's in a game or something like that.
Have you played paintball?
Yeah, I did not like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the anticipation of getting
It's scary.
shot is, oh no,
It was
wants that?
actually the people who've invented paintball have cited this story, The Most Dangerous Game, as their inspiration.
Wow, that makes a lot
But yeah, I
of sense.
played paintball too, and it's super,
Yeah.
I got shot, and it hurt,
Right.
and then I'm just, really scared the whole time.
Yeah.
War as hell, Mary.
I mean,
It's
we
true.
would we made foam swords they weren't nice soft ones like we could have on a LARP or whatever. They were just PVC and really tightly wrapped foam, and you just whack.
Well,
people.
what we used to use were old, you'd have your wiffle ball bat,
Oh yeah.
but it'd mess up, right? So then you just tape it all up with duct tape, and then now you're beat the heck out of your brother sword thing.
Well, the thing too is we would run around on golf courses at night because you have there's woods usually, it's their homes, and you kind of steer clear of yards and stuff because people get antsy. But a golf course at night, usually there aren't people patrolling it, so you can just kind of run around, and there are open expanses and wooded expanses and pits and all sorts of interesting places to hide and
That sounds really
and
ideal.
duck around. And so you could play war games and tag kind of games on these golf courses, and
cause thousands of dollars of damage.
we were pretty. I mean, it's just you weren't usually doing more than tag at that point, but
Yeah, and I was wearing my cleats.
yeah, and shooting BB guns at windows and stuff, just like good kids should.
Yeah, got your wrist rocket.
No.
Got your wrist rocket, shooting them.
But there was, I think too, then when we got older, we would walk around town at night after curfew, because you would basically, there wasn't really a curfew, but it was sort of you would walk around, walk down the street, and if you saw cars, you had to jump in the ditch, because if it was a cop or somebody, they would take you home.
They'd drive you home.
Right. So it was sort of
Which is weird. Is that a common thing from there? Because that definitely never happened when I was a kid. You could walk out. Cops didn't care.
Well, I mean, if it's if you're a 15 or 16-year-old and it's 11, 12 o'clock at night or later even, because you're out on a weekend running around at 2 in the morning, we would get pulled over if we were driving at 17 or 18, 16 or 17 doing that stuff. So the cops would definitely, they just don't need that random element. You don't need the aggravation.
I don't know. It sounds like a violation of your human rights.
We didn't have rights. We were underaged. I mean, our parents, we should have been at home. They're just
should have been at home.
rules.
What are you, 60? Come on.
That's why we ran out. It's the
we were
rules
young
there.
kids. We should have been at home minding
We
our own
should have been,
business,
yeah.
reading a book.
We should have been underwater.
Should have been praying.
Yeah, exactly.
No, man, you got to be allowed to be out at night. When are you going to, skip stones at the reservoir?
But see, that's the thing. You do that during the day.
No, man.
During the godly
No,
hours.
you do it at night. It's fun. It's more fun.
Night skipping.
Yeah. So yeah, did you guys find this stuff scary?
Again, I didn't find it scary necessarily. I mean, it's a great story, and I would definitely recommend people reading it. And again, it's not long either. It's a really quick read. But I didn't find it necessarily scary.
Giaco's is scary.
There was a scene in this, or really a moment that actually did really scare me. And I think it only scared me because it reminded me of an even scarier scene of another book. But the scene where he shows the guy, the protagonist, where the general shows the protagonist his, like, training grounds that he's got, where he's, like, working the people. And it's, like, sort of underground, I get the feeling of. It's, like, in his cellar, and he's, like, training people. Have you guys read The Road?
Yeah.
I have.
Yeah, it's that scene where the scene where they like open up a basement door, and there's like people underneath that like can't see. So it really, I don't know if you remember that in particular. There's like a very terrifying basement.
It's just
scene.
like a horrible concept.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of like people being locked in a basement, and like being that the basement door being that to me is a very, very visceral scene of a sort of basement door being opened and people like shielding their eyes from the light that are being kept down there. Is like,
I guess I saw that in this book. I saw that moment as sort of like, these sort of sailors in like a gymnasium, kind of like posing like
that
a
is
gold.
not how I saw it. Man. It was really, I guess I have a darker mind, but I was like immediately like, dungeon.
Well, because if I was
1920s dungeon.
I guess I put myself in
Yeah.
Zaroff's place. This guy is, he's paying for the best.
Right.
He's got electricity. Like, he is a modern man.
Right.
And he's gonna have a nice, well-stocked gym. He's gonna feed these guys well. He's gonna give them a fighting chance. And
Because that makes the sport better.
that makes
for
the
him.
sport better. So I guess I just saw, like, these guys, like, sort of this, like,
yeah, like doing pull-ups and stuff.
yeah,
like
sort of like,
with
heterosexually,
handlebar mustaches and like
being like helping like oil each other down
Yeah.
to wrestle and stuff, and just
Where they
kinda-
have the old weights that are just spheres.
yeah,
Yeah.
It's like dumbbell kind of stuff. Yes, that's what I pictured.
not what I.
Gladiators.
It was
Giving each
scary.
other-
I mean, it was scary. It was,
It's scary.
Giving each other tattoos.
yeah. What about you, Mary? Was this your pick scary to you?
Well, I mean, I think it was kind of scary when my parents read it to me as a kid. It's the first time that I would have thought about, people hunting other people and dogs eating people alive, and
I guess that is scary. Like the idea of being eaten by dogs, that is pretty scary.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not scary to me now, but it's still it's a frightening concept.
Yeah.
How about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's tense, and it's sort of like adventure movie or adventure action story where you have these like tense moments, and I mean, it's that the sort of style and stuff makes me think about like the old Conan stories, and he ran into the same stuff a lot, and his stuff was usually kind of horror-y. His was more. This was interesting because this is one of the only stories that was. I mean, there's sort of like, or one of the only picks of our all scary picks that was more realistic, and the threat was someone who sort of had a malaise and was kind of tired, and he had, his only sort of like fantastic contraption was some lights that he would turn on to lure people to their doom so he could collect them for his hunt. But otherwise, it was all pretty like this could happen, and there are cases of serial killers doing this kind of stuff. Like, it's the kind of thing where someone could be off and do this, versus like in the Velt, it's a science fiction-y sort of like cerebral thing, and in Poltergeist, it's, is it ghosts attached to this girl, ghosts attached to the building, like all kinds of, it's supernatural, otherworldly stuff. And Halloween is
Could totally
witches
happen.
and science. I mean, yes, it's 8 more days till
Practically
Halloween.
real. Practically real.
So there's sort of
Ripped from the headlines.
candy in ice cream bars. Dun, dun, dun. I don't know. It's, but anyhow,
this is one of the ones
this
that
is the
could
ones
actually
that's
happen.
like this.
It's not
this
supernatural.
This could be manufactured very simply. Someone could put this together and find the sport for this. You could have a reality show that is the innocuous version of this. And there are, like, Assassin is like a game people play on campuses where everyone who joins in puts in a photo. They have rules about how to be assassinated. and you have a mark and a target.
Well, it's well played out in the movie Gotcha.
There you go. Based on the guns with the ink.
Yeah, well, Gotcha Guns came out after that. Yeah,
exactly. So, yeah, I like The Dangerous Game.
Good.
the most dangerous of games.
It was pretty dangerous.
Was dangerous for the general.
That's true.
And I have seen the movies. The Fay Ray one and one other. The Fay Ray one was shot on the same set, and Moonlight shot around the same time they're shooting King Kong in 1932. So yeah.
How'd they work Fay Ray into it?
They added a female to the thing.
She
So
was
there's a man
in the
and
castle with the guy?
Yeah, so there's a man and a woman sort of lost / shipwrecked.
Oh, okay.
And he ends up hunting the two of them, which that's something that they didn't have in this, but that's sort of, this is a mano-y-mano kind of moment, like a super hunter versus a super hunter, you know, one versus the other. Whereas what you'll see in like Battle Royale or one of these others are either innocent people or like a pair, and part of the danger is just keeping each other alive.
So there's a movie that came out on pay-per-view not long ago, but it's John Travolta and I believe Bob De Niro, and it's kind of like one is an ex like Kosovo soldier, and the other one's like an American soldier, and they kind of have a hunt thing like that. I wonder how much of that. I didn't see the movie, but that's what the premise is.
Huh.
So I'm wondering if it parallels this at all.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what's also kind of frightening about this story and different from like a straight revenge, like assassin killer hunt, is just this guy's doing it for sport, for fun,
Right.
for kicks, basically. Like, let's see if I can kill you. Run. So, you know.
The twist in the movie Hard Target is that it's a business, and they hire and they bring in the rich people that actually pay money to hunt other people.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So the idea is that like if you're rich enough, you can get into this secret society that can kill hobos in New Orleans. But only trained ex-military hobos. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's where the real money's
That's where
at.
what makes it more fun.
Or Jean-Claude Van Damme
All
with
right.
a mullet.
So The Most Dangerous Game from 1924. Who is the author, Mary?
Richard Connell.
All right. Yeah. Thank you for that pick.
Yeah, it's a good pick.
Yeah, that was great.
He's a
I lived a year on the minute,
trip
frozen,
down
every
memory
muscle
lane.
tensed.
Very good, Rainford. Very good. You've done well. Your Burmese tiger pit has claimed one of my finest towns. Again you score. I think, Mr. Rainsford, I'll see what you can do against my whole pack. I'm going back to get them now. Thank you for a most amusing evening.
At daybreak, lying near the swamp, I was awakened by a sound which made me know I had...
There are many possible answers, such as hard work.
Feel I'm alone in this hole of existence. I know it takes time, but I'm losing my persistence. The distance is too far to fetch, so I sketch on pages and hope that some catch the thoughts of my inverted worded music. No trial and error, just emotion when I do this.
So this was the second part of our Scary New to You show. I was one of your hosts, John Holt. With me was...
Mary Varn.
And...
Giaco Furino.
And Keith Vincent.
All right. You can find me at Lord Joho. You can find Mary at
Mary Varn on Twitter.
You can find Giaco at
Giaco Furino on Twitter.
And earthlingkeith.tumblr.com.
All right. You can find more about the content of this show and leave comments at our blog or Tumblr at newtoyoushow.com. And you can learn more about us or what's going on with the podcast show at New to You Show on Twitter.
And I hope you're not too frightened by the blog this last 2 weeks.
All right. So I want to thank everybody for working hard on these episodes. Thanks, Giaco, for coming out.
Thank you. This was a blast.
Be with him together forever, without the limitation of time ever again. So the second coming of the Lord is not dead. They're two separate